coming up.
I appreciate that, but that's not what the House order was. So I'd like you to please table with the committee.
Point of order.
Just 1 second, Mr. Perkins.
$400 million that improperly went out the door during Ms. Verscheren's tenure as chair of SDTC, and this committee is trying to get to the bottom of why former Liberal Minister Navdeep
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Just 1 second, Mr. Cooper. Yes.
It's just he's making false accusations.
Mr.
The member knows that it's a Conservative member who made donations.
This is not a point of order.
It's very clear. There's no gray matter here. It's very clear. Parliament has the authority to request documents unredacted. But here we have 100 and some odd pages with heavy redactions that are unconstitutionally made because Parliament has the authority to call for these documents. It's very clear. Do you accept that Parliament has this authority, or is the position of the Privy Council office that you are above the Constitution and you have the authority to black out information rather than provide the information duly requested by a committee? Is that the position of the Privy Council office?
16 candidates were shortlisted.
Well, 6 candidates were made the final list to minister.
Correct.
6,
Correct.
not 16. 6. How many of those, other than Ms. Verscheren, had conflicts of interest with SDTC?
Mr. Chair, I would apologize that that's going to be personal information.
The Access to Information Act is not a person. It did not all of a sudden become sentient and order you to redact those documents. What is the name of the person who ordered you to redact the documents?
Mr. Chair.
To present to committee.
Point of order.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
From the Privy Council Office, Donalyn McClymont, Deputy Secretary to the Cabinet, Senior Personnel and Public Service Renewal, and Rima Hamouni, Assistant Secretary to the Cabinet, Senior Personnel.
So in response to a production order or documents motion here at the committee around Ms. Verscheren's appointment, PCO, as the witnesses referenced, has provided documents, and there's 107 pages, pages 12 to 30, pages 48 to 66, pages 78 to 84, page 97 to 103, are in total 41 pages. You can see them here in all the yellow stickies were redacted. They were redacted, which seems to be a PCO habit these days. Can you tell me who told you to redact these pages?
Mr. Chair, as I noted from the outset, as public servants, we are obligated under the Privacy Act to protect personal information. That said, I would just really emphasize for the committee that we have taken some very exceptional measures to provide as much information as possible to strike a very delicate balance of giving the committee the information that they need to do their work while respecting the personal information of the individuals who were qualified for the various processes. And I would just say above and beyond that, we also had sought Ms. Verscheren's agreement to provide details for her appointment.
But that wasn't my question. Who authorized or said that these pages should be redacted in PCO?
Mr. Chair, we operate under the auspices of the Privacy Act, and we would have gone through the pages ourselves. My team would have looked and applied the Privacy Act. If we had any questions, we would have consulted with our legal counsel.
As the Department of the Prime Minister's Office, did the Prime Minister's Office review this before it was released?
Not to my knowledge, Mr. Chair. If they had an opportunity, not from our office, they wouldn't have reviewed it, no.
Will you table with the committee all the emails within PCO and PMO with regard to what should be done with these documents before it was tabled in committee?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but...
Well, you would have had lots of communication, email back and forth when you got the stack of documents about what to redact and hide from the committee and what not to. So will you table those emails with the committee?
We'll endeavor to see if we have any records on hand that could be helpful in that work, for sure.
Okay, so, it's really hard to get at the details of this thing because, of course, Mr. Verscheren testified, and the first answer is usually the correct answer. She testified 3 times that she has not applied for anything in her life, and that Minister Baines called her twice before that. And a week later, she wrote a letter saying, of course, she applied, and I suspect she applied after she had had the 2 calls from Minister Baines. So does anything that you've redacted here deal with the issue of Minister Baines' phone calls to Ms. Visharan to talk about taking this on to the job she didn't apply for?
Mr. Chair, we have provided the information as requested, so that would include the advice letter. As I mentioned, the advice letters that were requested. It would also contain personal information about the applicants. I would just underscore that we did note in our letter back that we didn't have any documents that had any transaction to the member's question between ourselves and the minister or the minister's office or the prime minister's office for that matter on her application or any further details.
So you're obviously aware, the witness is obviously aware that we've been now 3 weeks dealing with, in the House, with a privilege motion of the breach of privilege of the House order for documents related to SDTC from every government department, which did not say censor them, redact them, but the government has redacted quite a few, including PCO is on the list. So if these documents were provided to the law clerk, were they provided in this form, redacted?
Sorry about that. Yes, Mr. Chair, we would have provided exactly the same redactions to the package that we would have provided to the law clerk, and we would be consistent with the law.
This is the list from the law clerk of the latest redacted departments versus the ones that didn't redact. There's a small list of didn't redact and a long list of did, and a couple of agencies here that have actually refused to comply. So what I'd like to know, because you're part of the Privy Council team, is who in the Privy Council office made the decision to send the order out to the two government departments saying, we want you to filter the House of Commons request through the Privacy Act and the Access to Information Act, that filter which was not part of the House's motion and is the point that we're discussing for the last 3 weeks in the House. Who made that decision to send that filter out?
Mr. Chair, I wouldn't really be in a position to answer that. My assumption was I was here today to discuss the appointment. I guess to try to be as helpful as I can be on this point, we would apply the legislation, the Act,
I appreciate
to
that,
our
but that's not what the House order was. So I'd like you to please
Point of order,
table
Mr.
with the
Chair.
committee.
Point of order.
Just 1 second, Mr. Perkins, yes.
Again, I respect my honourable colleague, who himself was a government and council appointment before this time, is asking questions that the witness is clearly not able to answer and not her responsibility.
So,
and he's asking.
Okay, Mr. Duran, you are up in just a.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, have a little respect for witnesses, and maybe we can get somewhere.
Have a little respect for your colleagues in the House.
Gentlemen, Mr. Duran, you are up next. The witnesses are being quite forthcoming.
I'm in the phone book.
Ms. McClymouth is answering questions. Okay, gentlemen.
They do in Nova Scotia.
Okay, Mr. Perkins, you're not helping as
country.
well, Mr. Perkins. The floor is going to be yours in a second. I'm going to turn it back over. You have a little bit of time left, and then we'll go to Mr. Duran. But the witness is not being maltreated here, is responding to the best of her ability, in my opinion, is being as forthcoming. And I recognize Mr. Perkins is probing, which is his right to do. So, Mr. Perkins, I don't know if you want me to go right to the witness, because you've only got about 20 seconds left, or do you want a little bit of time? All right, you've got time to finish your questions, then we'll hear from the witness. Thank you.
Will you table with this committee the person in PCO and PMO that sent out the order to say redact the documents on these two acts? Could you table that name with this committee, please, at some point?
Yes, unfortunately, I don't have that in front of me. I wasn't prepared to speak to that today, but we will go back and check with our colleagues and do our best to get it to the committee as quickly as possible.
Thank you. It wasn't so tough, Francis.
Okay, thank you very much. Look, we have professional civil servants here who are able to answer our questions. I think if we pose the questions in a manner that is respectful, even if they're tough, we should allow them to answer. Mr. Duran, you have the floor now for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I certainly agree we have professional public servants here. My issue is that they are brought here for a reason, and then we suddenly go on a wild goose chase, which Mr. Perkins knows very well, because he was appointed on February 21st, 2008, as a GIC to the Business Development Bank of Canada. And I would ask PCO, is it normal to release personal information of individuals who have been appointed to various boards of the government when they are labeled as GICs?
Pardon me, Mr. Perkins, until the end of yours, the room was quiet for you. I would ask you to extend the same
Mr.
courtesy.
Perkins doesn't
I would
like the
ask
truth.
Mr. Duran, please.
It's my time, isn't it?
I paused the clock, so as I do, but there's no point in you two winding each other up because it won't end well for the interpreters as well as our time here. Mr. Duran, you have 5 minutes, 30 seconds left. I'm beginning the clock again.
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned in my opening comments, absolutely, I think we do everything we can as stewards in the public service to protect the information that's provided to us, particularly in our line of business. As I mentioned at the outset, we respect the Privacy Act, and I think when somebody applies for a GIC position, they would absolutely expect that that would be respected. But it's an HR management practice. If people are going to apply for positions, they will expect that their information is going to be held in strictest confidence.
So if I was to table a motion today asking for Mr. Perkins' personal information because he was appointed by the government, Conservative government, back in 2008, and we know his history, we know he worked for Brian Mulroney, a Conservative Prime Minister, obviously PCO would still redact his personal information. Is that, and I don't want to put you in a partisan position, but that would be the normal practice for anybody who's been appointed to a governor and council position, correct?
Mr. Chair, the member's correct. Whoever applies, their personal information would be protected under the Privacy Act. Yes, that's correct.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm listening to my honourable colleagues on the other side, and I respect the process that we're in here today, and I'm questioning, these people were before a committee not too long ago. Why are they here again today? I'm still trying to figure out what the opposition is trying to get out of these witnesses, and knowing full well that the appointment that was made has the same relationship and had the same objective as Mr. Perkins had, which they both donated to a Conservative leader, potential leader contestant. And the idea that this is a green slush fund with a bunch of liberals is idiotic. C'est niaiseux, c'est stupide. Puis M. Perkins, qui s'en va maintenant, veut même plus écouter, se lève de la table, il s'en
And Mr. Perkins, who's leaving now.
les réponses.
Okay,
Mais la réalité, c'est que lui-même a été...
Mr. Perkins doesn't want to listen to my answers.
Mr. Perkins, has to go? That's good. Very good.
A motion adopted by this committee ordered the production of all communications between the PCO and then Minister Baines' office, the Prime Minister's office, and the Department of Industry respecting the appointment of Annette Verscheren as the chair of the Green Slush Fund. In response to that order, you wrote to the committee on behalf of PCO indicating that aside from one document that is being hid by the Trudeau government from this committee on the basis of cabinet confidence, no communications can be found. How is that possible?
Mr. Chair, it's a fair question for the member to ask. We did go carefully through the documents. We had nothing on hand. I myself was in Rima's position, Ms. Hamwey's position at the time of the appointment, and I have racked my own brain to make sure that there's nothing more that we could share with the committee, but it is, we do not have any records. I would, yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, with the greatest respect, I find it incredible that we have an appointment, government appointment, of the chair who is responsible for overseeing $1 billion taxpayer dollars, and the position of the PCO, the Prime Minister's Department, is that not a single communication, other than one, so not even an email, can be traced in the PCO, the Prime Minister's office, the Department of Industry, and former Minister Baines's department and office. I have a real tough time accepting that.
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned at the outset, we've provided all of the documents that we have. The advice letters are the final records that we keep of the deliberations of the selection committee and the advice provided to the minister. And we do not maintain other documents. We do.
Not a single email that can be found in anyone's inbox in the Prime Minister's office, the Department of Industry, former Minister Baines's office, not even a single email. And I'll tell you, I've got to say, for you, Mr. Chair, that why I'm having more difficulty accepting that answer is based upon the news of today, in which Blacklock's reported this morning that an IT official in Justin Trudeau's government deleted emails and texts relating to Trudeau's $60 million Arrive scam. In other words, the Trudeau government was willfully destroying evidence to cover up Arrive scam. And now we have another Liberal corruption scandal involving $400 million that improperly went out the door during Ms. Verscheren's tenure as chair of SDTC. And this committee is trying to get to the bottom of why former Liberal Minister Navdeep
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Just one second, Mr. Cooper. Yes.
It's just he's making false accusations.
Mr.
The member knows that it's a Conservative member who made donations.
This is not a point of order.
It's a Conservative member who made donations.
Mr. Durant, your side is up in a minute.
I just want to point out the record. Well, the truth is important, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Durant, and this is
important.
We go back and forth, and hopefully at the end of this process, we do get to the truth. But your member is up next in about 2 minutes. Mr. Cooper, you have the floor.
This committee is trying to get to the bottom of why former Liberal Minister Navdeep Baines appointed Ms. Verscheren as chair of SDTC, notwithstanding the fact that she had blatant conflicts of interest, and he knew about those conflicts of interest. And now all of a sudden, there's no records, no communications that can be found? How convenient.
Mr. Chair, I would just reiterate that we have done our best to provide not just the documentation that we have, but to be as forthcoming as we can be to find the right balance, to support the committee in its work by redacting personal information, but giving the minutes of the committee meetings and the outcomes of the reference checks. All of that information was provided to the committee, and we took the exceptional measure of seeking Ms. Verscheren's approval and consulting the Privacy Commissioner to provide as much detail as we could.
With the greatest of respect, Mr. Chair, is that if, in fact, there are no emails, no communications whatsoever that can be found, it demonstrates that Ms. Verscheren's appointment was cooked up by Minister Baines to see that Justin Trudeau's preferred candidate was put in place. It demonstrates that the process, there was no process. It was cooked up by Minister Baines. It was a sham to get this conflict-ridden person, Ms. Verscheren, who was receiving $12 million in funding from SDTC at the time of her appointment. It's a disgrace.
Thank you very much. Up next with Ms. Yip.
You were unable to provide this committee with board minutes from the selection committee that considered the Verscheren appointment, citing that these records were transitory in nature and were disposed of once an appointment was made. Your letter to this committee states that the official records of deliberations are reflected in the advice letter and candidate summaries. I'm wondering if you could speak to this.
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, the selection committees are like an interview board. So we take notes on the interview as it transacts, and we have individuals that are on staff who serve as scribes, and they take that information from the selection committee and they put it into the advice letter. So ostensibly what you have are the minutes of the selection committee, the final formal document. We do between 30 and 60 processes a year. We interview between 5,000 and 10,000 people. We cannot, under the Privacy Act, hold that level of information on every single person from every single interview. So we do try to keep good records in terms of the final documents being the advice letter.
Ms. McClement, I want to start with you. Am I correct, you've worked at the Privy Council office for about 20 years, or at least 20 years?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Tomorrow, actually, I will have 30 years in the government. So I started in 1994 at the Department of Canadian Heritage as a management trainee, and I joined the Privy Council office working in plans and priorities in 2003.
So congratulations on nearly 30 years. That's an excellent accomplishment. So you are very familiar with government and how government operates and your duties as a public servant. First of all, to whom do you report currently in your current position?
I'm the Deputy Secretary to the Cabinet for Senior Personnel and Public Service Renewal. I was appointed on the recommendation of the Prime Minister in 2021, and I report through the Clerk of the Privy Council office.
And did you discuss with the clerk your testimony today?
I certainly gave the clerk a heads up in terms of how I was going to approach things, some of the questions that we thought would be anticipated, and how best to support the committee in their deliberations.
So this is getting to where my concerns are. You are a 30-year public servant. You report directly to the clerk of the Privy Council, but yet the actions that you and your office have undertaken are actually contrary to the Constitution. You came here today and you said in response to previous questions that you withheld information from Parliament, that you redacted information that Parliament has the constitutional authority to request. Do you accept that Parliament has the constitutional authority to call for documents without redactions?
Mr. Chair, I understand very well, and I'm following very closely as a student of public policy the debate that's actively going on. I would reiterate my opening comments that we are responsible as public servants, and that this is an active debate that goes well beyond me and my responsibilities. I understand the law clerk's position and the opposition's position, but I also am bound and swore an oath when I took office as a public servant that I would respect the laws that we are bound by, and we are bound by.
I'm going to interrupt you, though, but you also, as part of that oath, part of the oath we all take as parliamentarians is to respect the Constitution. And the Constitution provides Parliament with the unfettered authority to call for documents. This is laid out very clearly. Beauchesne says very clearly, committees may send for any papers that are relevant to their orders of reference. Within this restriction, it appears that the power of the committee to send for papers is unlimited. The law clerk has been very clear. Boskin-Gagnon is very clear. This helpful document here, based on principles firmly established in constitutional parliamentary law, and it goes on to say, a house of a committee has the full authority to summon and compel the attendance and testimony of any person and to summon and compel the production of any document. It's very clear. There's no gray matter here. It's very clear. Parliament has the authority to request documents unredacted. But here we have 100 and some odd pages with heavy redactions that are unconstitutionally made because Parliament has the authority to call for these documents. It's very clear. Do you accept that Parliament has this authority, or is the position of the Privy Council office that you are above the Constitution and you have the authority to black out information rather than provide the information duly requested by a committee? Is that the position of the Privy Council office?
Mr. Chair, I would just reiterate it has been the position of consecutive governments that the application of the laws that Parliament passes have to be respected in the production of documents, and that is what we have done here. We have protected information under the Privacy Act, solicitor-client privilege, cabinet confidences, and sensitive business information. That's our obligation under the law as public servants.
I would make it very clear. There are clear examples within this very Parliament, within this the 44th Parliament, where committees have ordered and individuals have produced documents that even violate solicitor-client privilege. This power is higher than solicitor-client privilege, and yet the Privy Council office says that you are above the Constitution. I find that wholly unacceptable when Parliament as a whole, Parliament as the House of Commons passed and these committees passed information, and yet you've taken it upon yourself as the Privy Council office to block that information that has been duly requested. I think it's highly troubling that this is the position that PCO has taken.
Can you speak to Ms. Andrea Lee's Mathot's appointment to the SDTC Board of Directors? I believe she was appointed back in 2016, so you were definitely around at that time. Was she a GIC appointee?
Mr. Chair, no. This individual is not appointed by the Governor and Council. As I said earlier, it was a very novel structure, the SDTC Foundation, and the members of the foundation actually appointed 8 of the directors, and she was one of those 8 directors appointed by the foundation itself.
Okay, so by the foundation, but not by the board of directors, or?
Well, by the members of the foundation through the legislative framework that allowed for the appointment of the other 8 directors on the board. That's
Okay.
how she was appointed.
Okay, so that should bring some clarity then to my Conservative colleagues. With respect to the redacting of documents, there's been much made about the documents that are being presented are being redacted. You've been a public servant for 30 years, and in the current department since 2003, I think you said, right? Under the previous government, prior to 2015, did you redact documents? Was it a common practice then to submit redacted documents?
Mr. Chair, over the course of my career, as the member refers to, I have worked on a lot of access to information and documents when we've provided them either for individual requests coming from outside or production of documents for parliamentary requests. And yes, I would have been responsible over the course of my career for reviewing documents, determining redactions, and making recommendations on redactions, 100%.
Because of personal privacy concerns, as you stated earlier.
All of the key elements, the Access to Information Act, Privacy Act, solicitor-client privilege, cabinet confidences. Quite frankly, a lot of my career was spent working on policy committees under this government, previous governments, and we would have redacted for cabinet confidence purposes. So I've seen it all, I guess.
So it wouldn't matter what government was in power at the time, the same rules apply, right?
That's correct.
Right. So how does PCO appointments deal with flagged conflicts of interest in an application? What do you do with this information, and what weight does it hold in any deliberations or PCO considerations?
Mr. Chair, when we see with an application somebody who may have a conflict, sometimes it's such that it's not going to be possible for the person to proceed. So we may just screen them out, quite frankly, if the conflict is seen to be insurmountable. But generally speaking, we have a conversation with the individual over the course of the appointments process. And as I said, it really is a best practice from our perspective for individuals pre-appointment to engage with the ethics commissioner to make sure that either they will divest to have no conflicts, or that their solid mitigation strategies are put in place to ensure that they won't find themselves in a conflict over the course of their appointment.
Mr. Cooper, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go through the steps that led to the appointment by former Liberal Minister Baines of Annette Verscheren as chair of SDTC. Is it correct that on March 15, 2019, PCO provided a short list of 5 recommended candidates for chair of SDTC to then former Liberal Minister Navdeep Baines?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
And Ms. Verscheren was not on that list, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. We know based on the report of the Ethics Commissioner that in April 2019, Minister Baines called Ms. Verscheren. Then, on April 30th, 2019, a month and a half after PCO had provided Minister Baines with a short list of 5 recommended candidates, Ms. Verscheren submitted an application. She was interviewed by the selection committee on May 14th, 2019, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
And just to confirm, the selection committee was comprised of representatives from Minister Baines's office, the Prime Minister's office, as well as representatives from the Department of Industry and PCO, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And then on May 21st, 2019, a second letter was sent by the PCO to Minister Baines adding to the short list of recommended candidates with a 6th name, that being Ms. Verscheren, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And how many candidates did PCO interview between March 15th, 2019, when the short list of 5 recommended candidates was submitted to Minister Baines, and when PCO provided it's the second letter with Ms. Verscheren's name on May 21st, 2019.
So, Mr. Chair, maybe I'll just go through a few numbers. So for the March 15th letter, there would have been 54 applicants at that time.
My time is limited, and I
Right.
asked a very straightforward question, and I understand there were 54 candidates that applied in the fall of 2018. Ms. Verscheren wasn't one of them. There was a short list of 5. I'm asking how many were then interviewed between the letter with the 5 recommended candidates on March 15th and the second letter on May 21st, 2019, when Ms. Verscheren's name was added to the
Okay.
list.
Yes, I'm sorry. I see your question. So there would have been an additional 47 applicants. 16 were shortlisted, and 3 interviews were conducted for the May 21st, 2019 letter.
There were 47 additional applicants between March 15th and then.
That's correct.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. No, and that's not correct. Between October of
No,
20
I'm asking you, so I just want to be very clear. I'm asking between March 15th, 2019 and May 21st, 2019.
Correct. So we reviewed applications, Mr. Chair,
So
on
how many were submitted between that time? You had a short list. It was in the minister's possession for a month and a half. Then he calls Annette Verscheren and asks her to apply. She applies, she gets interviewed, she gets added to the list. How many other candidates did you interview, did the selection committee interview during that period?
We interviewed an additional 3 candidates.
And had they applied after March 15, 2019?
No, they applied
They hadn't.
after October 12th, 2018.
They hadn't applied after March 15th. So Ms. Verscheren was the only candidate that applied after March 15th, 2019. And it just seems, is that correct?
Mr. Chair, I would just clarify, and I apologize because I know it is confusing with all these different dates, but we reviewed applications on October 12th, 2018, and we interviewed 8 individuals for that first batch for to March 15th, 2019. In that intervening period between October of 2018 and May 2nd of 2019, an additional 47 people applied. We shortlisted 16 and we interviewed 3.
And what was the last date that you provided?
May 2nd, 2019.
May 2nd, 2019. And of the candidates that were shortlisted, 6 candidates.
16 candidates were shortlisted.
Well, 6 candidates were made the final list to the minister.
Correct.
6,
Correct.
not 16. 6. How many of those, other than Ms. Verscheren, had conflicts of interest with SDTC?
Mr. Chair, I would apologize that that's going to be personal information, and I would not be able to provide details of the 5 other candidates and their personal circumstances. I would refer back to the fact that we did provide the summaries of each one of those individuals in terms of their candidacy through the selection committee review and the reference checks.
Why do you think you're here today?
I feel that we're here today to provide some important clarification. As Mr. Perkins said, there seemed to be a bit of confusion around Ms. Verscheren's appointment, and I do think it's important for the committee's work to understand that there was an application, there was a process by which she went through, and that she was recommended ultimately by the minister, and we're very happy to come and give those explanations to the committee for their important work.
Turning back to the official opposition, Mr. McCall, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks for some of your answers today. I just want to get back to a question that Mr. Perkins, I think, asked earlier. Who directed you to redact these documents? Because it didn't come on your own volition. We know very clearly that Parliament has a right to order these documents. So who ordered you to redact these documents?
Mr. Chair, I would say that
No, I'm not asking. You would say a straight question, straight answer. Who ordered you to redact these documents?
Mr. Chair, when a request comes in, either through the Access to Information Act or a production of papers, central coordination within PCO will send out a request, and we are requested to comply with the request that's been presented, like I said, either under the ATI or production of parliamentary documents. And it would be...
Ms. McClintock, I'm going to interrupt you. This is not under the ATIP Act. It's not under the Privacy Act. It's a direct order from Parliament. We have unfettered access to records as long as those records exist in Canada. That is the law. The law clerk has stated as such. Parliament has ordered. Who directed you or someone else to redact these documents before sending them back to us? And it's not a group decision. It's not something in the ether. I would like the name of the person who directed you to redact those documents, please.
Mr. Chair, I would say it's the Access to Information Act that we rely on.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. The Access to Information Act is not a person. It did not all of a sudden become sentient and order you to redact those documents. What is the name of the person who ordered you to redact the documents?
Mr. Chair.
To present to committee,
Point of order.
please.
I'm just going to making assumption that somebody ordered. The witness is trying to explain how they go through the process, but won't let the witness finish the answer. I'm having a hard time understanding. If we wanted to get to the bottom of the truth, we must let the witness speak. Let the witness speak.
Mr. Durant, your side will be up in just a few short minutes. Well, it's
Sorry,
true.
Mr. Chair, we have to have an orderly debate. I don't care.
No, actually, Mr. Durant, this is not a debate time. This is
exactly when a member of Parliament asks a question, we have to let the witness answer.
Mr.
And we're
Durant,
not letting the
Mr.
witness
Durant,
answer.
you are wrong about that. This is
absolutely no. I'm not wrong. I've been here for 9 years. This is not how we operate on committees.
For 9 years. This is the member's time, and that applies to your side as well as the opposition, to ask the witnesses to interrupt them, to refocus the question.
I'm just wondering, Mr. Chair, are we opining on the witness's testimony, or do we want the answer? This is what I'm asking. Do you want the truth, or do you want members?
The truth.
We might as well not have witnesses if they're not able to answer.
Mr. Durant, I'm sorry you don't like the way the opposition asks questions, but they're entitled to ask it.
They're not asking questions. They're opining. They're asking a question and then keep interrupting.
That's your interpretation, sir. That's your interpretation, and we give you the opportunity to ask questions your way and to ask the witnesses to
I don't interrupt the witness when they answer because I have respect.
I think you interrupt people more than I think you realize.
I know, man.
Mr. McCauley, and again, what I see here, Mr. Durant, is every time you jump in and interrupt the officials here, it looks like you've got something to hide. The official is actually doing a job
You're
here.
You're on my opinion.
Well, I am, because you're sitting there doing the same thing to me.
Because I cannot listen to the witness. That's the point, Mr. Chair. If we are going to have an honest conversation here, we must let the witness answer the question.
Right. All right.
Simonek.
Well, except the opposition has got a great point that there are rights from Parliament that have not been respected. Mr. McCauley is trying to get to that very answer and trying to do so.
Point of order, Chair.
Mr. Durant, your side will have an opportunity for 5 minutes. Yes, Ms. Khalid. Oh, really? All right. Yes, Ms. Khalid.
Thank you very much, and I do have to say that there is a point to be made about decorum. And as chair, it is very difficult for members of all parties for us to digest your own opinions on this committee. As you know, Chair, and I respect you immensely, but being neutral, being nonpartisan on this committee is very important, and I really appreciate that my colleague has expressed his views, and I have said this time and time again, that when witnesses come before committees, they should be given the opportunity to respond to the questions that they are being asked. This is not an interrogation. This is not an opportunity to grasp whatever clips the opposition may want to fundraise off of tomorrow or today. This is, a fact-finding mission, as Monsieur Drouin clearly pointed out. So, Chair, I would really expect you to do your job as Chair, to be nonpartisan, and to ensure that there is decorum in how we operate as members and how we treat witnesses in this committee.
Tom would have cut you off at OJ.
Thank you.
Yeah, he would have.
Thank you thank you very much. I'm going to go back to Mr. McCauley. Again, as I've said, this time belongs to the members. Mr. McCauley has been respectfully asking just to pinch the question in a little bit more. Mr. Drouin, you're your own worst enemy here when you interrupt yourself. Ms. Khalid, I'm equally hard on the Conservatives when they do the same. When they do, I stopped the meeting and waited for one Conservative member today because I was tired of him lobbying at your side. So if you weren't here for that,
Chair.
I'm sorry.
I've been on this committee for a year.
Mr. McCauley, you have the floor. Again, you've got just over 3 minutes.
Holding the information that the committee has ordered.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure I quite understand the member's question. At the end of the day, we would have been the ones to determine the redactions within my group.
So PCO, and the Prime Minister is the Minister in charge of PCO. Again, I'll go back to the original question. Who ordered or directed these documents to be redacted? It has to come from someone. It wasn't on its own. Who, please?
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, there is a central coordinating unit within PCO who directs when we get requests for parliamentary documents, to prepare the documents, to respect the requests from the parliamentarians, and to apply the necessary legislation.
Walk me through the process. Did you receive this and then go to this central governing board? Did they provide it in writing? Was it a phone call? An email?
We normally get an email sent out at senior levels, so the email probably would have come to me directly or perhaps to Rima.
Would you provide that email to us, please, with the directions?
We can certainly have a look if we have that on hand, Mr. Chair, and we'll do our best to provide it as quickly as possible.
You mentioned on hand, and I'm greatly concerned. You mentioned other documents that you quoted, we don't keep documents. You repeatedly referred to the ATIP law, but the government has very specific instructions on holding and keeping documents. And yet earlier you stated, when Mr. Cooper was asking, there was only one email about a specific subject. You stated, well, we didn't keep the records, we didn't keep documents. Are you following what is required on the Information Act or the ATIP Act on keeping records?
Mr. Chair, we absolutely hold the responsibility as good stewards, and information management is a top priority for me in our branch, and we absolutely take that responsibility very seriously. As I've mentioned to the committee, the selection committee processes are really like an interview panel where people take notes, and we use those notes as the final documents of the advice letter.
Those notes have to be kept, though. They are required to be kept. But you threw them out.
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, they're handwritten notes, and they are considered transitory.
I'm sorry, handwritten notes are required under the ATIP Act to be kept. They're not to be thrown out. They're no different than texts or emails. They are required to be kept. Do you not see an issue here?
Mr. Chair, as I've mentioned, the notes are used to formulate the final advice, and that is the final record. And that is the requirement in terms of our record keeping, of our obligations, both within the organization but also under the law, to keep a final record of the deliberations of the selection committee.
How much time, sir?
One last question, brief.
Just very quickly, just walk me through a simple, real easy one. The good behavior appointments, you said they have a very high bar for dismissal. I'm looking at the process for hiring. Everyone does have to sign off on the Governor Council Appointments Candidate Declaration Certification Form, which covers the ethical and political activity guidelines for public office holders. Very clearly, a lot of the directors violated that statute. Why is it so difficult to terminate them when they very clearly failed to follow the rules under the ethical and political activity guidelines for public office holders. I think they met a very high bar in violating these conflicts of interest.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. I'll allow the witness to answer.
Mr. Chair, it's a very fair question that the member asks. What is the bar for good behavior appointees? And as I've mentioned, I'm not a lawyer by training, but our lawyers have advised us that it's cause, and cause is generally where there is illegal activity or fraudulent activity, or to the member's point that a law has been broken. We would have to do an investigation and have a very solid dossier in order to remove someone. In this case, the individuals resigned before that course of action could have been taken.
Thank you very much.
Lord.
And our final member, Mr. Erskine-Smith, joining us online. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
The letter that was held back based on the confidence of the Privy Council, what's the rationale for that? How can that be justified given the parliamentary request?
Mr. Chair, just I wouldn't mind clarifying the question. The letter that was held back.
Yeah, it says there communications between the Privy Council and Minister Baines. There was, I think, one piece of communication that was held back because of confidence of the King's Privy Council. That was the document that we received. I mean, that seems like an inappropriate withholding, I think.
So, Mr. Chair, on that document, it was a cabinet confidence, so that would have been advice to cabinet. So you can take what you will in terms of the appointment itself, why we would withhold that document. To the member's question regarding the documents that we provided, I would note that we did redact Ms. Verschuren's personal information, and I think that it's important to redact personal information of all of the individuals in question. But I would say that you do know by deduction that Ms. Verschuren was on the May 19th letter. She qualified for the chair position. There was one individual who qualified for the chair position. So it is, to me, pretty clear, and we were clear with her on that point, that the information that we would provide would grosso modo reveal her candidacy, if you will. So as I said, I think, Mr. Chair, we've been extremely forthcoming while trying to respect the personal information of not only Ms. Verschuren, but all of the candidates, but as forthcoming as we can be in terms of her overall application.
Thank you. Mr. Erskine-Smith, your time has elapsed. Do you have one last question to wrap things up, Mr. Erskine-Smith, or are you satisfied?
No, satisfied. I just think, one comment perhaps. I appreciate how forthcoming you've been, especially here today. I do think, though, in the interest of ensuring that all air is cleared, I mean, if you're saying this information could be found at some other, then why redact it in some other manner? I think full disclosure as it relates to Ms. Verschuren, it would be welcome.
Thank you very much. That is our last witness. I do want to thank Ms. McClymouth and Ms. Hamouni for your testimony and participation in relation to the study. I do have one question, which just is about the letters that Madame Secretary has requested. I just want to be clear on this about what the request was, and if you think you'll be able to provide it, which was the resignation letters. And I believe Madame Secretary understands redacting any personal information. Is that? I think you said you were going to endeavor to get them back to us in a format that would allow us to consider the contents. Is that?
We will endeavor to see if we're able to provide those. But I would, as I said, we may have to redact certain information. But we will check and see what is in the realm of the possible. Okay,
the committee might take that up. I know there's been requests for a number of pieces of information. If you could present those to the clerk.